Ever feel like your mind is just racing a million miles an hour, always stuck either rehashing yesterday's regrets or like worrying about all the what ifs of tomorrow? You're definitely not alone, trust me.
Yeah.
So today we are diving deep into a book that kind of promises to help us like reclaim the only moment that we truly have, the now. We're talking about Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just like your typical self-help book, you know. It really goes beyond that.
Right.
It's more like a guide to understanding consciousness itself.
Yeah.
At least that's what it claims.
Hmm.
I'll admit, I used to be the queen of overthinking, always replaying past mistakes in my head, stressing about things I had absolutely zero control over.
Oh, yeah. We all do that.
So naturally, when I heard that the power of now promised peace, like genuine peace, in the present moment, I was immediately hooked.
It's a big promise.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to unpack some of the key takeaways from the book and see if it actually lives up to all the hype. So Tolle starts off by tackling this idea of the illusion of time.
Yeah.
He basically argues that being obsessed with the past and the future, it actually robs us of any joy we could be experiencing in the present. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really interesting point because we often mistake our thoughts about time for reality. Like imagine you're on that dream vacation that you've been saving up for forever,
Okay, yeah.
but you spend the whole time worrying about work emails piling up back home.
Oh, yes.
So you're physically present in this like amazing paradise.
Right.
But mentally, you're miles away, stuck in the future.
So relatable. I think we've all been there at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if we're constantly trapped in this mental time warp, who or what is the culprit here?
Well, Tolle points to the ego as the main offender. You know that inner voice that's always competing for our attention and wants to be in control?
Okay, yeah.
That's the ego. And it actually thrives on keeping us feeling separate and insecure.
So you mean like that inner critic that's always comparing us to others or making us dwell on our flaws?
Exactly. It loves to identify with our thoughts and emotions, even the really negative ones.
Why would it do that?
Well, because by doing that, by identifying with those negative thoughts and emotions, it creates a sense of self-importance.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like it's saying, look at me, I'm so special, I have all these anxieties and problems.
Huh. It's like that annoying roommate who hogs the mirror and like thrives on all the drama.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we like break free from this ego's grasp? Because Tolle talks about becoming the observer, right?
Yes, exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. So instead of being constantly swept away by every single thought and emotion,
Right.
we can actually learn to just sit back and observe them without judgment. Like picture watching clouds drift across the sky. You don't need to grab onto each one or analyze its shape.
Oh, I see.
You just watch them pass by.
So basically, we're creating space between our true selves and that constant mental chatter. And that's where we find the peace that Tolle's talking about.
That's exactly it. Because in that space, we start to realize that we're not our thoughts. We are the awareness that's experiencing them. And that's a very powerful shift, especially when it comes to dealing with negative emotions. Think about a time when you were maybe procrastinating on a project or something.
Some of the time.
Yeah. So chances are your ego was probably feeding you all these thoughts like, this is too hard or I'm not good enough.
Right.
But by simply observing those thoughts without judgment, you can actually start to disentangle yourself from their grip and then take action.
Wow, that's a real game changer.
It can be.
But wait, there's another concept that Tolle throws in here. The pain body, which, gotta say, sounds a bit intense.
Yeah.
Kind of like something out of a horror movie.
It's not as scary as it sounds, though.
Okay, good.
I promise. Just think of it as this reservoir of old hurts, like past traumas and negative experiences that we kind of carry around with us.
Okay.
Have you ever snapped at someone when you were already stressed or having a bad day?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Happens all the time. Not always proud of how I react when I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Well, that's a perfect example of the pain body kind of hijacking your reaction. So it gets triggered by certain situations or maybe certain people, and suddenly you find yourself reacting in ways that don't really align with who you truly are.
So it's almost like those old hurts are distorting our perceptions in the present moment and then influencing our behavior.
Exactly.
So what do? Do we just try to ignore the pain body and hope that it will eventually go away?
Well, Tolle suggests a more proactive approach, actually. By becoming aware of our pain body, recognizing what triggers it, and then consciously choosing not to let it dictate our reactions, we can start to diminish its power.
Okay.
Like, let's say you're stuck in traffic and you feel that familiar surge of road rage bubbling up.
Yeah.
Instead of letting it take over, you just acknowledge it. Like, okay, there's my pain body getting triggered again. And then you can consciously choose a different response. Maybe you take a few deep breaths
Right.
or put on some calming music, something like that.
That makes sense. So we're not suppressing the emotions, but we're also not letting them control us.
Right.
We're taking back the reins.
Exactly. And this leads us to the heart of Tolle's message. True fulfillment actually lies in embracing the present moment.
Okay, so it's not about achieving some distant goal or waiting for everything to be perfect. It's about finding that joy and peace right
Yeah.
here,
Oh,
right now.
precisely. Think about how often we actually miss out on simple joys because we're so stuck in our heads.
Hmm.
We're so busy replaying the past or worrying about the future that we completely forget to appreciate the beauty of like a sunset
Yeah.
or the taste of a delicious meal or even just the warmth of a loved one's hug.
Ugh, so true. I can get so caught up in my to-do list that I completely forget to, just enjoy the moment.
It's so easy to do, but that's why Tolle's message is such a powerful reminder for all of us to try and shift our focus. Happiness isn't something we're going to achieve at some point in the future.
Right.
It's something that we experience right now in this very moment.
Okay, so all of this sounds great in theory, but how do we actually do that? Like, how do we break free from this constant mental time travel and actually embrace the power of now? That's what we'll explore right after a quick break. Okay, so we're back and we're talking all about the powers now. We were just getting to the heart of it before the break. Like, how do we actually live in the present moment? I feel like it's easy to get caught up in those should haves and could haves and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our minds are kind of wired for storytelling, right? Always analyzing the past and then projecting into the future.
Right.
But, Tolle does offer some practical techniques to help us shift that focus.
Okay, good.
And one of the most powerful ones is this idea of acceptance.
Okay, but acceptance, I mean, that doesn't mean just giving up or resigning ourselves to bad situations.
Right, no, not at all. It's more about acknowledging reality as it is without that resistance.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Let's say you're stuck in traffic.
Oh, great example. Happens all the time.
Right. So resisting it, getting all angry and frustrated, that only makes things worse.
Right.
But if you can accept it, maybe you use that time to listen to a podcast or enjoy the scenery or something.
Sure.
Then you can find a little bit of calm even in a frustrating situation.
So it's not about passivity, it's about actually choosing our response instead of just being controlled by our circumstances.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to another really important concept, letting go of the mind.
Okay, so I can't literally take my brain out of my head.
Right.
So what does Tolle actually mean by that?
It's about quieting that constant mental chatter, that like endless stream of thoughts that can often lead to stress and anxiety.
Right.
He suggests things like meditation and mindfulness. Even just a few minutes a day can make a huge difference.
Do you have any tips for someone who's maybe never tried meditation before? Because it can feel kind of intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. One of the simplest techniques is just to focus on your breath.
Okay.
You find a quiet place, you close your eyes,
Yeah.
and you just observe that natural rhythm of your breath.
Okay.
And when your mind wanders, and it will just gently guide it back to your breath.
Right.
There's also a ton of guided meditations out there,
Sure.
online, through apps. Just experiment, find what works for you.
It's like hitting the pause button on that mental movie that's constantly playing.
Exactly.
What about for those of us who are always on the go, though?
Yeah.
Can we still practice mindfulness even if we're super busy?
Oh, absolutely. Mindfulness isn't limited to just formal meditation.
Okay.
You can bring that present moment awareness to any activity, really, whether you're washing the dishes or walking the dog or, even stuck in traffic.
Right. Right. So, like, instead of rushing through the dishes, I should focus on, like, the feel of the warm water or the scent of the soap.
Exactly. You engage your senses and you bring yourself fully into that moment, even if it's something really mundane.
Right. It's like transforming the ordinary into something more meaningful.
Yeah.
So all this talk about inner peace, it might make it sound like Tolle's advocating for a life of solitude,
Mm-hmm.
but he does talk about relationships in the book, right?
He does. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He calls them conscious relationships. And it's about, being fully present with your loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
letting go of judgments, and truly listening to what they have to say.
So it's like putting down our phones,
Yeah.
Silencing those inner critics and really tuning in to the person right there in front of us. It
Exactly.
kind of makes you wonder how much deeper and more fulfilling our relationships could be if we just approach them with that level of presence.
For sure.
But it's not always easy to stay present, right?
Right.
Our minds are going to wander. Do you have any advice for those moments when we catch ourselves slipping back into those old patterns?
Yeah, it definitely takes practice and commitment,
Mm-hmm.
but like any skill, the more you practice mindfulness, the better you become at it.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not about achieving some perfect state of presence where you're never distracted or stressed.
Right.
It's more about recognizing when your mind has wandered
Okay.
and gently guiding it back.
Mm.
It's about being kind to yourself when you inevitably get caught up in that drama.
Good reminder. We're all human. Our minds are going to do what they do.
Yeah.
And speaking of practice, Tolle really emphasizes the importance of silence and stillness.
Yes, he does. And he talks about silence as not just the absence of noise, but as a gateway to the present moment.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a sense of inner stillness.
Wow.
You know, a space where we can connect with our true selves.
So it's not necessarily about going on like a silent retreat or anything.
Right.
It's more about finding those pockets of stillness throughout the day.
Exactly. Even just a few minutes of quiet reflection, maybe during your commute or before bed,
Sure.
it can have a huge impact on your well-being.
It's like giving our minds a much-needed break from all the stimulation.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From acceptance to letting go of the mind to cultivating silence and stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other key takeaways from The Power of Now that you'd like to highlight before we wrap up?
Yeah, one final thought that really resonates with me is Tolle's emphasis on finding joy in the simple things.
Okay.
You know, we often get so caught up in chasing these big goals and achievements that we forget to appreciate all the beauty and wonder that's already in our lives.
It's like we're so focused on the destination that we miss all the scenery along the way.
Exactly. But Tolle reminds us that true happiness isn't about arriving somewhere. It's about embracing the journey.
Yeah.
It's about finding pleasure in a warm cup of coffee, you know, a walk in nature, or a heartfelt conversation with a friend.
It's about slowing down, savoring the moment, and appreciating all the little things.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And on that note, we're going to move on to our final thoughts from The Powers Now and discuss how we can all apply these teachings to create more fulfilling and meaningful lives. All right, so we're back, wrapping up our deep dive into The Power of Now. We've covered a lot of ground, from recognizing that illusion of time to understanding how powerful acceptance can be, and like even just learning to be more conscious in our everyday lives.
Yeah, definitely.
So as we kind of bring this conversation to a close, is there anything else that really stood out to you from the book? Any final takeaways that you want to leave our listeners with?
You know, I think what really resonated with me, and maybe this is something for our listeners to kind of ponder as well, is this idea that true happiness and that real peace, it all comes down to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, what's one small step you can take, like today, to bring yourself more into the now?
That's a good question. It's not just about reading about these concepts, right? It's about putting them into action in our own lives.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's not about becoming some kind of meditation guru overnight or anything.
Yeah.
It's about making those little conscious choices to shift our awareness.
So maybe it's starting a day with a few minutes of like mindful breathing or really being present with that first cup of coffee instead of just scrolling through our phones.
Exactly.
Or maybe it's about really engaging in a conversation with a loved one instead of letting our minds drift off to that never-ending to-do list.
Yeah, I think those are great examples. Just finding those little pockets of stillness and awareness in the midst of all the chaos.
And as we start doing that, we start to change our whole relationship with time, with ourselves, and with the world around us.
I think so.
We've only just scratched the surface of The Power of Now today, but I already feel like I have some new tools to work with.
And if you're interested in exploring these ideas further, I definitely recommend picking up the book and, diving in a little deeper on your own.
It's definitely a book that deserves to be revisited. I know I'll be coming back to it again and again.
And remember that, finding that inner peace, it's a journey. Yeah. It's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment. It's about making those little choices, moment by moment, to align with the power of the now.
So well said. We've covered some pretty profound concepts today, but I think it all comes down to this. The present moment is really all we have. It's where life is actually happening. It's where joy is found, and it's where we discover our true potential.
Absolute.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Sounds good.